Independent member for Clark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Premier. Yesterday you announced in your Premier's address changes to land tax thresholds. You said, when combined with the changes we made last year, it will provide about $220 million of tax relief for property owners over the next 4 years to put downward pressure on rents. However, Mr Speaker, we know that last year's cuts did not result in more affordable rent. Quite the opposite, in fact, with rents still significantly increasing and more Tasmanians experiencing housing stress. Premier, what measures is your government going to introduce to specifically ensure that these land tax cuts get passed on to tenants? Or is this all about making the rich richer and actually does nothing to help the thousands of Tasmanian families struggling to afford to put a roof over their heads?
Honourable Premier.
Well, I thank the independent member for Clark for that question. And again, I'd make the point, as I did yesterday, that land tax is one of the first building blocks of rent. And if I had announced an increase in land tax, I'm certain that you'd be standing up saying that I was putting upward pressure on rent.
Exactly right.
And so by lowering the level of land tax, we lower the one of the costs that is one of the major building blocks of rent, which is the point that I was making, which goes to putting downward pressure on rents as opposed to increasing taxes and putting upward pressure. Now, I would have thought, Mr Speaker, that the member would understand that, but more importantly, it does give me an opportunity to say, the housing package that we announced yesterday is groundbreaking. The housing package that we announced yesterday over 10 years, there's more ambition in this place than any other government in the history of Tasmania. Order. Than any other government in the history of Tasmania has demonstrated, Mr Speaker.
Order.
Yourself.
Member for Franklin, order.
Yesterday, Mr Speaker, will increase supply significantly of social and affordable homes, Mr Speaker. With the measures that we have in place as well in terms of home builder and the first home builders grant, Mr Speaker, they will assist to build supply. And in building supply, Mr Speaker, then that has the opportunity to put downward pressure on house prices, Mr Speaker, over time, which, as the member would know, principally drive upward rents. If the property's more expensive, you pay more for it. That is a given. A statement of fact, to be frank, Mr Speaker. And so I would have hoped that the independent member for Clark, who has had an interest in this area for some time, would have been able to at least welcome that significant package yesterday.
That's right.
Welcome the acknowledgement that this government has made that more needs to be done and that, importantly, we are going to do more.
For them to ask you, DD.
Speaker, in terms of the building block of rent, land tax is one of the base pieces of that, and what we have done is we have determined that we will reduce that, Mr Speaker, and that in itself provides the opportunity for downward pressure on rents.
Honourable member for Lyons, Mr Tucker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Premier. Premier, can you please outline to the House how the Tasmanian majority Liberal government aspirational policies will deliver better outcomes and secure Tasmania's future?
Good question.
Honourable Premier. Order.
Are they really going to go with aspiration? I think they are.
What's the start? Just need to get on to
Mr Speaker, I thank Mr Tucker.
I can't get the basics right. You might want to focus on those first.
Thank you, Mr Tucker, and obviously the very hard-working member for Lyons that he is, Mr Speaker. Well, Mr Speaker, this side of the House, we believe in Tasmania, Mr Speaker. We are proud of our state, Mr Speaker. And importantly, we do have aspiration for our state, Mr Speaker. And I would hope that those in the red masks, those that are more interested in playing Squid Game, Mr Speaker, would this afternoon provide some level of support for the significant measures that we laid out yesterday, Mr Speaker. In terms of hospitals, a 10-year goal, Mr Speaker, including with what's in the budget at the moment, to spend around $1.8 billion on health infrastructure
What
across
about
the state,
outcomes?
Mr Speaker.
What about staffing?
Mr Speaker, in terms of housing, Mr Speaker, as I've just said, you know, the most far-reaching, far-sighted, Mr Speaker, announcement on housing that has ever been made in respect of social and affordable housing ever by a government yesterday. $1.5 billion worth of measures, Mr Speaker, an additional 6,500 houses, Mr Speaker, 10,000 in total by 2032, Mr Speaker. I would hope that that side of the House could support that, Mr Speaker. And then, Mr Speaker, in terms of sporting infrastructure, yesterday, Mr Speaker, $1.8 billion over 10 on health, Mr Speaker, $1.5 billion, Mr Speaker, on housing, Mr Speaker, $750 million, Mr Speaker, for a stadium that will put Hobart and Tasmania on the map, but more importantly, Mr Speaker, on the map with all roads leading to it, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, the other side of the House, Mr Speaker, the other side of the House, Mr Speaker, have made an art form over time, Mr Speaker, of tearing things down, of whinging and moaning, Mr Speaker. This is their opportunity. This is their opportunity to stand up and back Tasmania, Mr Speaker. Stand up and back Tasmania, Mr Speaker. We back Tasmania in, and we'll continue to do it, Mr Speaker, because we believe on this side of the House that young men and women, Mr Speaker, boys and girls in this state should have the same opportunities that other kids in other states have, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, that is an aspiration, Mr Speaker. That is an aspiration, one that they should share, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I was very proud to provide the state of the state yesterday, Mr Speaker, because what it demonstrated was that we had come through 2 years of a worldwide pandemic, and we are emerging with a strong balance sheet, with a strong budget, Mr Speaker, an economy that is in the top 2 in the country, Mr Speaker, and an unemployment rate of 3.8%, which has never been heard of in this state before, Mr Speaker.
What's the participation
Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker.
Seriously.
What we're going to see from the other side, Mr Speaker, what we're going to see from the other side, unfortunately, Mr Speaker, and it's what we've come to expect, is that they will be negative, Mr Speaker. I've said on many occasions that whinging isn't a platform, Mr Speaker, complaining isn't a policy, but that's what we're going to see, Mr Speaker. I would urge them to get behind Tasmania, like we're getting behind Tasmania, Mr Speaker. Because, Mr Speaker, not only can we secure Tasmania's future, Mr Speaker, what we can do, Mr Speaker, importantly, is we can send a message to every young boy and girl in this state, Mr Speaker, that it's okay to lift your eyes above the horizon.
When you're living in a car,
that it's okay to have long-term goals and long-term ambitions, Mr Speaker, and importantly to have a plan, Mr Speaker, to help you achieve them, Mr Speaker. And I was so pleased this morning when I heard Clarko back in our vision for Tasmania, Mr Speaker. The best coach of the modern era, Mr Speaker, backing in where we're heading, Mr Speaker, and importantly, the announcements that I made yesterday, Mr Speaker. They will drive our economy. They will attract investment. Importantly, they will create jobs. And what they will do is they will provide opportunity, Mr Speaker, for Tasmanians right around this state.